What is cracking, everybody? What is cracking, everybody? What is cracking, everybody? See if I can get my internet fixed here. Hold on. See if I can get my fixed here. Hold on. All right, we're back up and running after some internet issues. We have lots of free agency stuff to get to. Some questions in the mailbag if anyone's here and wants to chat or has questions about any free agency, any trades, just random, anything that's going on. We'll try to get to as many as possible. As we're doing this, the Knicks and the Pistons completed another trade. The Knicks are sending 2 second-round picks to Detroit in exchange for them taking on Nerlens Noel and Alec Burks. This is going to clear the way for them to not only probably sign Jalen Brunson, who is now favored to go to New York over Dallas, but it should allow them to keep Taj Gibson, whose salary was partially guaranteed as well. The Knicks, when you view sort of their moves in the trades were not lumped together, but they turned the number 11 pick, 6 seconds, one of which is top 55 protected for Miami, and $6 million into offloading 3 expiring deals that were all signed last summer. The Pistons, 23 first, which is top 18 protected through 2024. Then there's a bunch of different protections. It should convey because it goes down to top 9 protected until 2027. They have the Wizards 2023 first, top 14 protected, all the way down to top 8 protected. I believe that goes through 2026. Then the Bucks is 2025 first round pick, top 4 protected, which is I don't think the value there is actually egregious. I think it's the angle that kind of skews this more to me, is that at the end of all this, all you're going to do is sign Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson's a fantastic player, but he's the guy that you sign after you already have the guy, or who you chase when you at least have someone on the roster you can envision becoming the guy. That's not Julius Randle for the Knicks. We don't know if it's RJ Barrett yet, but he's through year 3, and we need to see him become a more efficient scorer overall. It's great that he was attacking the basket more last year, but we do need to see that change in him before you're going to go as far as to say, okay, hey, he is the guy. This is a risk here, and I think it's fine that Jalen Brunson is going to make $25+ million a year. Great for him. I just don't think the Knicks are the team that should be the squad that's paying it. And then also to go through all these hoops just to end up with Jalen Brunson, and how much better are you next season? I will say, with the trades that they've made, it does seem like they have more playing time for Quentin Grimes now, with Alec Burks is gone. So there's that to look at. It should be easier to play Cam Reddish as well. Maybe you have a little bit more playing time if you're going to re-sign Mitchell Robinson, and you can experiment with Jericho Sims more. Or maybe they plan on playing Randall and Toppin together since Nerlens Noel is on the way out. But if Taj Gibson sticks around, I'd be very remiss or shocked to see the Knicks really lean on Jericho Sims more. It does seem like they're going to re-sign Mitchell Robinson and then kind of move forward with, we want the traditional bigs on the court. Taj Gibson will be another one of those. Again, we'll see how much run that Jericho Sims ends up getting. I think the Mavs are also kind of losers here because they had the ability to sign Jalen Brunson to a 4-year, $56 million extension as well. And they passed on it twice, I believe. Once last offseason, then he agreed to sign it again in January, but they wanted to wait until after the trade deadline. That did not work out for them. They, per Tim McMahon, were willing to go in the Fred VanVleet range over 5 years, which comes out to like 5 years, and I think it's 110 or whatever it is. And it sounds like the Knicks are going to be prepared to offer that over 4. So, like, that's a pretty, the Knicks are giving Jalen Brunson over 4 years, basically what the Mavs were prepared to give him over 5. why wouldn't you take that? And they hired his dad as an assistant. We all know that. Leon Rose used to be his agent as well. This feels like a done deal now. You don't make these steps. We can clown the Knicks, and it would be honestly funny if this ended with New York not getting Jalen Brunson. But you don't make all these moves to not, like, if you don't know that Jalen Brunson's coming. And we can get into the whole tampering aspect of what that actually means. But it's decidedly done. Like, this is, basically like PJ Tucker going to the Sixers. Everyone feels like that's done. Jalen Brunson to the Knicks is the most foregone conclusion in NBA free agency right now, aside from maybe, knowing that Bradley Beal is going to resign in Washington, or that Zach LaVine is going to resign with Chicago. I would just be floored if he's not there right now. I don't even know what to expect from the Knicks next season. Some people don't think they're done moving. Again, they do still have like a nice first round pick cachet. I just don't know what the move is out there. I don't think Jalen Brunson's the one that takes them to that next level. Good on him once again for getting paid. I just don't know what that really does to the Knicks. I think it ties them more so than anything now to they have to trade for a star. Like, it's not through the draft, because they're going to be mediocre. They're never going to draft high enough in theory to get that tentpole cornerstone. Maybe you get lucky towards the end of the draft. You also have to be willing to play those players, though, that you pick. And Tom Thibodeau has never been the greatest about that. I do worry maybe moving Alec Burks ensures that Emmanuel quickly continues to get ample playing time. But if there's a healthy Derrick Rose and you have Jalen Brunson, I'm just curious how much playing time Emmanuel quickly gets. And look, these are all young players on the roster that you should want to see more of. Deuce McBride and Quentin Grimes, Cam Reddish, who you invested a first round pick in. RJ Barrett's spot is safe. Obi Toppin played more towards the end of last season. Will that continue? Will Tibbs consider experimenting with Toppin and Randall, something that he's been pretty adverse to doing? He always wants to have sort of that traditional big on the court. The other thing that I think we have to wonder about is, while Jalen Brunson's a damn good player, he was one of the most efficient drivers in the NBA last year. I think only 4 players who finished at least 500 drives, 3 players, who finished at least 500 drives shot a better clip on them. It was Giannis, Karl-Anthony Towns, and I think Chris Paul. I don't want to misspeak, but I think those were the 3. So we're talking about a damn good player. How much different does he look, though, if he's either your number 1 or he's a co-number 1 and Julius Randle's your co-number 1? You just came from being Luka Doncic's number 2. That's a big difference. The Knicks also aren't going to be able to carve out the same level of space. Dallas always basically had 4 shooters on the court, sometimes 5. The Knicks sometimes play with 3 non-shooters at a time, depending on how you view Julius Randle, depending on the night. Yeah, he'll shoot, but is he going to hit his threes at a high enough clip? And you're always going to have Mitch Robinson or Taj Gibson, maybe Jericho Sims at the 5. That's one non-shooter. Do you count Cam Reddish as a shooter? Does RJ Barrett qualify as a shooter at this point? He shot good enough on set jumpers so far over the past 2 years, I think, that, okay, if you want to throw him in there. But it's sometimes, a lot of times they're playing with 2 non-shooters on the court, if not more. That's going to crimp the spacing for Jalen Brunson at times. And I don't think that he's going to suck there. The move is curious. And perhaps we should give the Knicks time to sort out the rest of the offseason and see what it looks like. But my gut reaction, and we can get into this if anyone who's watching, and we still have some stragglers in here, should really put this out on Twitter. I'll do that next. Without them making other moves, I don't think that I'm going to end up liking what they did this offseason. And this is not in a vacuum. Again, the value that they turned number 11 into, it's not egregious. Like, it's just, they didn't do terrible here. This actually looks maybe a little bit even better if you view them together, even though they're separate transactions. I just don't understand what they're thinking here. This just feels like a bunch of CAA bullshit artistry to me. And look, we'll see how it plays out. I'll be happy to be wrong. I love seeing players succeed. It'd be nice to see the Knicks like rebound from that disaster of a season that they had this year. I don't see it with this move. I don't think this is the move, and I don't think they're viewing it as it either. It's just, if you're gonna go do that, like, it's just, there's got to be something else here, and that's just, whether it's my humble opinion or not, but that's where I'm at with that. We do have some questions, but I think to get to the other thing that I wanted to touch upon is the PJ Tucker to the Sixers thing, which is interesting. He's apparently expected, per multiple reports, to sign for 3 years and about $30 million, or $27 million with incentives that get him to $30 million, to rejoin Daryl Morey, James Harden on the Sixers. that is hysterical for a number of reasons because one, free agency hasn't started yet. And so we just know where this free agent is headed. And then two, the Sixers don't actually have that money to offer him. That's non-taxpayer mid-level exception money, which they have not accessed yet, which means that there's one of a few things could happen. They could be dumping salary. There could be like this huge Tobias Harris trade that cuts a bunch of money from their tax sheets so that they're far enough below the apron that they can use the bigger MLE to sign Tucker. Or maybe, contrary to what was initially reported, James Harden will opt out of his contract and then go ahead and sign a cheaper deal. That would save the Sixers more money. It could be a combination. He takes a little bit of a haircut. They dump some other salary. They have Furkan Korkmaz, George Niang, then go that route. And perhaps that's how they get to the PJ Tucker number. But all this has been reported without free agency starting and without the Sixers agreeing to those moves, at least publicly, to have the cap space. I find that hysterical. I like the Tucker signing for the Sixers. He can give you some backup 5 minutes in addition to just playing with Joel Embiid in the front court. He has experience playing with James Harden as well. That's super important. Again, for anyone who's straggling in, if you have questions, we've already talked about the Knicks trade. I'm going to go a little bit more into detail with the Pistons, who we just recorded an in-depth look ahead for them that was scheduled to go live tomorrow. That's now been obliterated. So I'd like to get into just the Pistons offseason and what they've done eventually as well. But if you have questions about the Knicks or any NBA questions at all, throw them in the chat. And I have questions here by the side that people asked ready to go. And we'll get to those in a second. PJ Tucker to the Sixers, though. I just find that unequivocally funny that we know this already. And 3 years for someone his age is probably a lot. He has some mileage on him at this point. He's been really an Iron Man for this portion of his NBA career, but he fits with the Sixers. And just the fact that he can give you backup 5 minutes, they kind of addressed the backup 5 situation last year with Andre Drummond, but then had to trade him away, and you were reliant on DeAndre Jordan. That didn't work out. And it seems like Doc Rivers was averse to playing Paul Reed a ton of times. So now maybe this allows you to bring Paul Reed into the fold as you're like sort of more, not traditional, but a backup 5 in addition with PJ Tucker takes on some of those minutes, or maybe you still find a big at the minimum. I don't know what the Sixers have up their sleeve. Reports even state that they're interested in Eric Gordon. They're just going to get the whole band back together. I want Houston to sign Trevor Ariza, Luke Ba-Moute next. Maybe they should try and trade for Chris Paul, reunite him with James Harden, but the Sixers are running it back, and I don't hate it. Like, I don't, the PJ Tucker signing, I'm eminently okay with in the end. Let's see if we can get to some of these other free agency questions that we have. I will be doing these off the cuff. Let's take a look at the first one from, where is it? This list. Nope, let's skip that. Let's go to this one. This is really bad live podcasting. Portland Trailblazers from Ian42. Wings, and more wings. Free agents. Wings, min guys, Kenrich Williams. Yeah, look, the wing market is really starting to take a hit. We just, Robert Covington signs an extension with the Clippers already. We just saw Taurean Prince sign one tonight before we were recording this. And the wing market was thin to begin with. And now you start to look at the list of available names. Do you all of a sudden consider Kyle Anderson a wing, even though he's kind of more of a 4 at this point? PJ Tucker, we think, is off the board. I don't know that I would color him a wing. Names that I would look at for the best wings still available. And if you're Portland, you have the non-taxpayer mid-level, which gives you a spending tool above what a lot of other teams could offer. But this just goes for anyone in the market for a wing. Gary Harris, Portland specifically, he might just be a little small when you have Josh Hart already there, plus Anthony Simons, and you plan on playing both those guys with Dame. TJ Warren, rehabilitation project, but he's a bigger wing who improved his defense in Indiana, can hit the 3 and has shown some shot creation. Daniel House is out there. Amir Coffey is one of my favorite underrated free agents. Showed some real two-way juice with the Clippers last year while they were injured. Ran some secondary pick and roll. Showed some ability to make decisions on drives. Defended basically 4 positions. Hit the 3 ball at a high enough clip. You could go with either of the Martin twins, Caleb Martin or Cody Martin. Both, they're 26. Both shot well from 3. Both restricted free agents, although Caleb, the Heat do not have his bird rights. Those 3 that I just named, Coffey and the Martin twins, could be sneaky good finds for all these teams. Wesley Matthews is age 35, but he's coming off the playoffs in which he defended really well. Otto Porter Jr. is out there. He's probably more of a pure 4 at this point, if not skewing towards a small ball 5 rather than having to guard 3s, but that's a name you throw in there. I do think, sort of because of how the market is tilted, we're going to see teams maybe reach a little bit deeper into the bag and be like, oh, okay, is there more of a competition for Dante DiVincenzo, who's a restricted free agent? And I'm not saying he was bad to begin with, but just not someone that you would circle as a a premier target. There's Victor Oladipo as well. I do feel like he's again on the smaller end. We're talking about more of a combo guard than a wing, but we've seen him defend up in the past. Lonnie Walker's out there, more offense first as well. You start to run out of names really quickly. Juan Toscano Anderson, not really a wing, but he's just super malleable. You can move him all over the place. It's going to be highly competitive, and there's not a lot of wings to choose from in this free agency market. I don't actually know what some of these contracts are going to go for because, look, the Pistons have just punted themselves from the cap space realm, and then a lot of the cap space teams, Orlando, I say a lot of the cap space teams, like there are actually a lot of teams with cap space, there are not. But you look at Orlando, you look at San Antonio, are those teams trying to win now? I think the wing market is going to play out via trades. And so Ian42 had mentioned Kenrich Williams, $2 million contract. OKC has been resistant to move him in the past. He fits anywhere, and I could see why OKC would want to keep him. They also have 19 players that could be under contract for next season. That's too many for anyone keeping score at home. Are they more open to moving him for draft equity? I don't know if you give up a first to get him. He's in an expiring year of his contract, and he's like on a really good team. Is he even your seventh best player? But that would be a great addition to get if you're Portland or any other team. I think Josh Richardson's going to be a sneaky find, especially if San Antonio is leaning further into their rebuild. That's someone who gives you just 3-and-D. He's shown in the past he can work off the dribble, but you don't want him doing that. And I think he quietly had a good year while he was splitting time Boston and then San Antonio. Those are wings that stand out. Kelly Oubre Jr. as well, if Charlotte's really looking to cut costs. Are there teams that consider more of a Gordon Hayward trade? 2 years, $60+ million left on his deal, a net negative, but the wing market is just so barren. Do you look at it? And I just feel like we're going to see, maybe not a bunch of trades, but we could see someone like a Josh Richardson command just quite a pretty penny on the trade market because of how desperate teams are for these archetype of players. It is a little bit odd, and maybe, he has not improved since he came to the NBA, but I'm just surprised that like teams aren't willing to give up more from Matisse Thybulle per multiple reports. I wouldn't want to dump him either from the Sixers. He's an offensive zero, but what he brings to the table defensively, that's not really something that it's just a given. So I'm just, given the state of the wing market, it would just very much surprise me if we don't see some trades where players who are maybe not, you wouldn't think they're just, traditionally going to command a lot. There's a bunch of competition for them just because of how thin that wing market is. Let's get to another question. Brandon asks, most likely destination for Dejounte Murray. This is an interesting question. He's only been linked to the Hawks thus far. Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report, and then also Zach Klein of WCB TV in Atlanta, I think it was, mentioned that both of them essentially said that the Hawks believe they're close to a deal for Murray. We've heard permutations where John Collins isn't involved. We've heard permutations where Collins is involved. The asking price is apparently 3 first-round picks. If you're getting John Collins and you're also getting 3 first-round picks, I don't love Collins long-term in San Antonio, especially if Murray's on the way out, and you're getting 3 first-round picks, though. Like, you could turn around and move Collins. That would be incredible value. Now, 3 first-round picks plus Gallo, that's a little different, but also 3 first-round picks is a lot to give up as well. I would count Atlanta as the favorites, if only because they've been the most aggressive, even if it's just in terms of allowing leaks to spill out into the public sphere. So I don't know how it could be anyone but Atlanta at this point. And then I know the Knicks were tangentially mentioned, and like I said, they do have the pick equity to do something. After signing Jalen Brunson, is your best use to throw your assets into another player who works predominantly inside the arc, just like Brunson? I don't think that that's like the best use of resources. And then there are teams like, when you look at the asking price, Dallas would love Murray, especially if Brunson is out the door, but do they have the assets to just really go out and get him? Cleveland could be interesting if they wanted to pair him with Garland instead of Sexton, but like, what are they building a deal around? Are you offering Jared Allen for Dejounte Murray? And do the Spurs even want that? And how are you balancing out the packages from there? So I would probably say no. I mean, if Golden State wanted to go nuclear and throw Kuminga on the table, they might be an interesting destination, but they just won the title. They're not going to do that. I would love to see Dejounte Murray and Tyrese Halliburton in Indiana. Again, I don't think the Pacers are going to be mortgaging their future to make anything happen there. Murray doesn't work in Memphis. Miami would be fun, but they need real half-court creators. And even if you can get Murray without giving up Kyle Lowry, I don't know. It's probably going to cost you Hero to do that in addition to pick equity. And Hero's so important to your half court offense. I don't know if I could get there for Miami, even if they were able to do it. That would be Bam, Murray, Butler on the same team plus Lowry. My God, that would be absolutely hellacious. The Pelicans are interesting. Do they have enough shooting, depending on who they're giving up? But what are you giving up? That's just strictly built around picks then, is they're saying we have this salary filler. It's Devontae Graham, smaller salaries. Are you willing to include Trey Murphy III, Herb Jones, picks? I'm not saying all those things at once, all those players and things. I don't want to call players things. I don't know. I mean, Zion, he's already a ball dominant player. You have Brandon Ingram, and he doesn't need to be a ball dominant player, but you have him as a playmaker. You have Brandon Ingram and CJ as a playmaker. I don't think you need Murray there, though he would just be tantalizing defensively. Orlando with Suggs and Paolo Banchero. I've talked about how the Magic maybe could consider buying if they just bolted down everyone, or if they bolted down only Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, and Jalen Suggs, and just try to put their best offer on the table and pick some of their like young guys in Chuma Okeke and RJ Hampton. Is Jonathan Isaac available? I don't know if the Spurs even want any of those players, but they have picks. They have a 2025 pick from Chicago, all their own picks. That could be interesting for them. Murray would be right up Toronto's alley, but they're so weird with salary matching. You would have to include one of OG or Trent plus picks. I don't know if that makes them materially better, and especially when they already have Fred VanVleet. I would love Murray in Washington. I wonder if they could crash the sweepstakes for Murray. You have salaries that you can use to match pretty easily. A bunch of them are expiring. In Kyle Kuzma, KCP, Ish Smith, Rui Hachimura is extension eligible. So he technically could be viewed as an expiring. And then you also have Denny Avdia as sort of your blue chip prospect in the deal, plus all your own future first rounders. You're not going to give up KP in this trade. If the Spurs really want Daniel Gafford for some reason, his extension doesn't kick in until 23, 24. That's probably my second most likely team. I don't know if I would call it my favorite. I love to see Murray in Utah if they can make that happen, but they can't without giving up Donovan Mitchell. So I'm going to say, to answer your question, Brandon, I think Atlanta is the most likely destination. I think Washington would be the second easiest fit beyond there if we're trying to talk in terms of realistic suitors. That being said, I do wonder if the Spurs will actually go through with it. I'm not entirely sure that they're going to go that route. Oscar Herrera asks, prediction for the type of contract Bamba will get. I think he probably ends up with he'll be a restricted free agent. I think he probably gets a 2 or 3 year deal worth in the $10 million range. He showed a lot, like his jump shot came along and he stayed healthy this past year. He's just big and long, can stand up at the rim. Stronger than I think that he looks still, even though he's not going to be able to hold up against the burlier bigs. But that feels like fair money, especially look at how bigs have been paid the past few years in Rashawn Holmes, the extension that Robert Williams III signed. Like those guys are making under $15 million a year. Even Christian Wood, look how cheap he went. Like his contract was already $12 million. Like only getting a bottom 5 first rounder for Christian Wood. If you're not a superstar big, the market seems to almost be working against you. He's young enough. And again, the shot blocking, floor spacing, big is sort of the ideal. I could see him getting like a 2 or 3 year deal in the $10 million range. I like for the mid-level exception, let's say the full non-taxpayers teams that maybe look at him. Is it Charlotte, maybe Toronto? They did just per their fans are very high on the center they drafted, rookie. And so those two teams, there's also, I mentioned Charlotte, like would Chicago consider him as a backup to Vooch or an alternative if they're moving Vooch? Brooklyn could use him. I don't think they could afford him. Indiana, maybe if they're getting rid of Miles Turner. He'd be really fun in Milwaukee. They're not going to be able to afford him though. Minnesota, they don't seem worried about playing Towns next to another big. Minnesota could make some sense there. Depending on what happens with Ayton, is Phoenix sort of a suitor there? Portland could maybe use another big behind Nurkic, but if you're going to pay him or you're using your non-taxpayers mid-level on Bamba, the Spurs again behind Jakob Poeltl or in addition to Jakob Poeltl, all teams that sort of stand out there. But yeah, I think Bamba gets around mid-level exception money, the bigger one, which is $10.3 million. And it'll probably be a 2 or 3 year deal. I'll be surprised if he gets more. I'll no longer be surprised if he stays with the Magic, though, just because it doesn't seem like it's going to cost a ton to keep him. And the uncertainty surrounding Jonathan Isaac's return has still sort of persisted. Luke J37 asks, I guess this will probably be answered in the look ahead, so feel free to leave it to them, but I wonder where you think the Cavs should go with their MLE. Another wing, backup point guard. I was leaning point guard, especially since they drafted Akbaji. That makes sense. When you are probably going to re-sign Colin Sexton and when you have Darius Garland and Karis LeVert, I'm probably just going to skew more towards shooting. Now, if you can find a point guard who can shoot and defend and then manage the game for you, that would be great. But do you use let's say Tyus Jones is willing to come to Cleveland for the mid-level exception, and he might be the best gettable point guard on the market right now. I want to make that clear. Kyrie Irving opted in. Jalen Brunson headed to the Knicks. I don't consider Anthony Simons a point guard, and he'll probably go back to Portland. It doesn't matter. We get to Tyus Jones. So I would not use the full mid-level exception. Maybe if Tyus Jones is the one willing to come just because he ranks at the top of the market, you can move him later. But aside from him, it's Delon Wright. That I don't know how much that moves the needle for a Cleveland team specifically. Dennis Schroeder, definitely not. I would probably just continue looking at bringing back Ricky Rubio, seeing when he'll be ready next season. Maybe that's something you could do at the minimum. I'm going wings, baby. Give me Gary Harris. Give me Daniel House. That shouldn't not okay. I give Gary Harris from Cleveland. I consider most of the mid-level. So I'm not just naming players that are going to command the entire mid-level. Daniel House. I like Amir Coffey there. Amir Coffey is one of my favorite free agents at the moment. TJ Warren, depending on how healthy you think he is, that makes just a ton of sense there. Man, this wing market thing thins out just incredibly quickly. Either of the Martin twins, as we've already mentioned before, they're not. Cleveland's too good to go the second draft route, right? To be like, oh, hey, does Jarrett Culver have anything left? If they just need straight shooting and they don't need to care about defense, can you bank on Kent Bazemore hitting more of his threes? What about Wayne Ellington? Someone just to sort of ping around the half court. PJ Dozier, always been a shaky three-point shooter, but definitely gives you depth on the wings there. On the smaller end, but if you want shooting, Jordan Nwora, 23 years old. We'll see if the Bucks are willing to match whatever or Cleveland would. I doubt that they are actually hell-bent on keeping him. I already named Juan Toscano Anderson. That could be one route. I wouldn't mind Kyle Anderson in Cleveland just for the value play. I'd like him more than Tyus Jones, even though Jones is the better shooter. Anderson has kind of honed his corner three-point shot, but the defense with Allen, Mobley, Kyle Anderson, Isaac Okoro is there. I'm sorry, I'm laughing at a comment from Brandon. Thanks for the answer on Murray, Dan. Wanted to hear the Celtics, but will remain scared of free agents. LOL. The wing market is tough, but if I'm Cleveland, I'm figuring out a way to add a wing. I'd be curious, does the mid-level get Dante DiVincenzo out of Sacramento? And does that do it for anybody? Cleveland being among them. They could take a flyer on Lonnie Walker because I don't think the Spurs want to pay him. You definitely want to have minutes available for Akbaji. Maybe you could you hedge? No, I was going to say Malik Monk, but I'm not doing that if you're bringing back Colin Sexton and have LeVert. Do you trust Bruce Brown shooting enough? That's an interesting one because that's someone who could defend all over the place, even if he's on the tinier end for a wing. Taurean Prince is off the board. That's really tough. Derrick Jones Jr. can defend all over the place. Not enough of a shooter. I prefer Kyle Anderson. I'm going to give you my top 3 targets here. Maybe 4 because I'm just going to include Amir Coffey. I don't know how many teams would be smart enough to look at him. Just give me Kyle Anderson for the value play. And it seems like Memphis, after the way they drafted, having Zaire Williams, Desmond Bane's emergence, having Dylan Brooks, they'd be more likely to let him go. Kyle Anderson, Amir Coffey, Gary Harris. I'm not going to put give me Bruce Brown. Just put all the defensive hellfire in there for Cleveland. And they, in theory, have enough shot creation with LeVert, Sexton, and Garland, hopefully. And PJ Dozier would probably be my top 5 for them. If you want to sub out PJ Dozier for a Dante DiVincenzo or Daniel House, I would understand. I wouldn't be mad at you. I'm not mad at anybody. So just in case anyone care about that. Lammy 17 in the chat says, any Blazers news? I know Blazers fans really want, we just had a question about wings that they could target. They are going to be in the market for wings. And I know fans really wanted them to go after Kenrich Williams. That is a premier trade target for them. I don't know how medium they're looking to go via trades, and now cobbling together salaries tough. Again, Kenrich Williams is cheap, but if you don't have the draft equity to send out in exchange for him, it does get tough to hash out a deal. Josh Richardson could be a good fit there, having him, Hart, Jeremy Grant. That gives you a lot of wing defense. I do think the implications, by the way, of Detroit sort of punting on cap space, I don't think they were a huge threat to go after Anthony Simons after getting Jaden Ivey, but they had the money to do that. And now that's just off the table. And you're sort of looking at Orlando and San Antonio because the Knicks are punting on their cap space. Or either one of them going to go after Anthony Simons to inflate his restricted free agent sheet. I don't think that they will. I would advocate for it for the Spurs if they were keeping Dejounte Murray, but I don't expect it by any stretch. So yeah, no new Blazers news at the moment, other than their offseason is shaping up to be like super interesting and more interesting than I actually thought it was going to be. So shout out to the Blazers. That was a home run of a Jeremy Grant trade for them. Salamander the Fourth asks, what's the best and worst Warrior the Kings could spend their full taxpayer mid-level on? The Kings should have the non-taxpayer mid-level, FYI. So if they wanted to poach a Warrior, the worst one they'd be willing to do it for, it's between the three of, and I don't think they're bad players, Gary Payton II, Otto Porter Jr., and Kevon Looney. I think they would most likely do it for Kevon Looney, even though they have Rashawn Holmes and Sabonis, because of that relationship between Mike Brown, head coach of the Kings now, and Kevon Looney. But of the worst players of those three is probably Otto Porter Jr. at this point, because I don't think he can handle as many minutes as the other two. And so I would say him. I don't think they would be like, hey, here's $10 million to Damian Lee or Nemanja Bjelica, a little reunion there. I don't see that happening. I would be #floored. So yes. Khalil Deadpool, I want you to explain to everyone why shooting is overrated, because I believe in Masai Ujiri. That's why I believe that shooting is overrated, Khalil Deadpool. I don't believe that it's overrated. The Raptors clearly do, and I think it's going to work out to them. Glad asked, in a fight to the death, put him in the Coliseum, no weapons, how many 5-year-olds do you think it would take to take down Shaq? I think it's got to be around 200. What Shaq are we talking about, though? Like, is it the current Shaq or Orlando Magic era Shaq, Los Angeles Lakers era Shaq, at the beginning or at the tail end, Miami Heat era Shaq, Cleveland Cavalier, Boston Celtics, Phoenix Suns era Shaq? Who? 200, if it's Orlando era Shaq or the beginning of his time in the Lakers era Shaq, I'm going to say 500 feels like a reasonable guess. 200 seems low. Joshua Lewis asks, which FAs are best suited to the new young Rockets? This is tough because Houston needs to consolidate bodies. They have, even after getting rid of John Wall, they have 18 players under contract after their 3 first-round picks and exercising Jae'Sean Tate's team option. They can get under that easily. They took on 4 non-rotation players for the Mavericks anyway in that Christian Wood trade, and it would cost about like $12 million just to waive Boban, Trey Burke, Sterling Brown, and Marquise Chris together. Maybe they plan on paying some of those guys, and some of them are just so cheap. Like, Sterling Brown's at $3 million. You can't find someone to take on Marquise Chris at $2.2 million. So they could move off of them. If they're looking for free agents, this is another team. I know every team needs wings, but they need wings. They have Jalen Green. They have the big set with Jabari Smith and Alperen Şengün. Kevin Porter Jr. is a guard. Garrison Matthews is a guard. Josh Christopher is a guard. Usman Garuba is more of like this combo big, like a 4 and maybe a small ball 5 eventually. I don't consider KJ Martin a wing, although he's really good. I'm naming all these players that are really good. Tari Eason, okay. Tyler Washington, not a wing. I would take a flyer on a young wing here. And I think they could probably also use a veteran point guard, like sort of to be, as I've grown to call it, the adult in the room in the half court. Would you sign Tyus Jones if he's willing to go there for the non-taxpayer mid-level? Work with Ty Washington. You also have, it eases sort of the burden on Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green and even Josh Christopher. That would probably be my favorite point guard addition. He's also the best point guard on the market, so we'd have to see there. Looking at wings, though, like Amir Coffey, the Martin twins, I'll mention them again. They could go lower end if they're going to actually give them playing time, like a Rodney Hood, Abdel Nader, even take a flyer on Wes Iwundu. Are they a second? Let's call them a third draft for Kevin Knox. That's what I would be doing if I'm the Rockets. Jared Culver, even. And I think you'd probably want to prioritize defense. So, throw Rodney Hood, Kevin Knox out of the equation already, just based off that. But the fact that you have the non-taxpayer mid-level does give you a leg up in some of these discussions. Would Dante DiVincenzo be interesting in Houston? Undersized for a wing, but I would like to see, like a PJ Dozier might be perfect for them to take a flyer on, because that's someone who was playing for a good Nuggets team before he got injured. I wouldn't mind Troy Brown Jr., not locked down defensively, but you can move him around. He's shown the ability to put the ball on the floor offensively, needs to improve his shot selection and just his overall shooting. You need to have moves lined up or get rid of those other guys first. I'm not even saying you have to trade Eric Gordon, because that might be a trade where you have to take back multiple players since he makes so much, unless the team is sending you back a bigger contract. So the Rockets can do a lot of stuff here, but it's just, do they have the body count to sort of facilitate that? The NHL chicken asks, Bradley Beal and Zach LaVine could both be changing teams. I see them both as third option on a championship team. Ooh, that's spicy. Who's realistically in the market to actually bring them in and become a contender? I don't expect either of them to move. And it would most likely be a sign and trade if it's going to happen. I don't know what Memphis for one of them would be perfect. If we're talking realistically, it's probably Miami. You could put Tyler Hero, Nikola Jovic, this year's first round pick. And then I think based off their commitments that they could technically give up their 2023 first, their 2027 first, and 2029 first. So you could technically give up what amounts to 4 first round picks, since this year's already turned into a player. Tyler Hero plus all the picks that it takes, and then Duncan Robinson. Or actually, you'd have to trade Kyle Lowry as part of that deal, because even with Zach LaVine, what his max is going to be, that money's not going to add up. He's looking at a 29.3. Duncan Robinson makes 16.9. Jovic brings that up to about 19. And then you have Tyler Hero, that's 24, 25 million that gets you to. That would be close. So if Zach LaVine is, no, that's not, first of all, that's not even Zach LaVine's max. So I must be talking crazy at this point. Zach LaVine's max is his cap hold is just lower. Yeah, you would need to give up Kyle Lowry to make the math work here. Would you be able to do that for Bradley Beal or Zach LaVine? Sure. I'd prefer Zach LaVine if I was Miami, but that would be the most realistic threat to me, because those teams, if they move those players, Chicago or Washington, you immediately have to enter rebuilding mode. It doesn't make sense to do anything else. And Miami, if you're able to offer Tyler Hero, Nikola Jovic, all these picks, that's probably the most enticing offer you get from a contender. I'm not saying other teams couldn't go out and beat it. I just don't know that they would become contenders with either of these players. Like, I don't think Atlanta, either of these guys, I think Murray would go a longer way in Atlanta just because of his defensive skill set. I don't know if Boston has the asset firepower. It'd be future picks, and then you're building stuff around who? Robert Williams III, Derek White, Marcus Smart. You're not giving up Jalen Brown or Jason Tatum in that deal, so I just don't see it. I know sign and trade, you're normally not compensated as much, but the Celtics don't have cap space to begin with. It also would be hard for them to work within the hard cap. The Heat have an easier time of doing that themselves. Dallas, you could throw in there. Again, working within the hard cap, coming up with the assets to acquire any one of these guys. They don't have the first round equity. So yeah, Miami might be the only answer here. New Orleans, no, I mean, like, that's redundant with CJ McCollum, even if Zach LaVine and Bradley Beal are better than CJ McCollum. Orlando going after any one of those guys would be interesting. I just don't think they'd be a contender. And then there's Philly, of course. They could work within the hard cap. Are you giving up Tyrese Maxey at this point, plus picks and salary for either one of those players? I'm sure a lot of people would. That's fine. And the Sixers, just knowing that Daryl Morey's there, going star hunting. So I'll say Miami or Philly is the answer to that question. If Zach LaVine or Bradley Beal leaves, which I do not expect either one of them to. Joe Schmo said, Dejante for Westbrook, right? I'd be shocked if that happens. I still, if I was a team, just because Westbrook's under contract for 1 year, if you can give back a player, like the Pacers, if it's Malcolm Brogdon, I'm absolutely taking 2 Lakers swaps and 2 Lakers picks for a year of Russell Westbrook. And it's not even have to be a year. You could just buy him out, eat up that money. I know a lot of teams don't think in those terms because it's so far in advance, but that's like along the lines of what you need a team that's willing to send back. Would the Hornets do something around Gordon Hayward, who needs to send out picks in that deal because Gordon Hayward has longer term money on the books? Burner Raps asks, who are the best unrestricted free agents that could be signed for the full non-taxpayer MLE? Sub question, who should Toronto target with their MLE? The names, if I'm looking at the best free agent that I think you could get for the non-taxpayer MLE, it might be like a Victor Oladipo or a Tyus Jones is what I'm thinking at this point. Maybe an Isaiah Hartenstein. I don't know if anyone would put them above the 2 I just named. Gary Harris had a hell of a year as well. I probably top out there, though. I'm higher on Coffee and Martin than most, but you're probably looking at more established guys. I'm going to say it's between TJ Warren's coming back from injury. I'm just going to say Tyus Jones. I think that's the guy. It's Tyus Jones or Isaiah Hartenstein or Victor Oladipo, maybe Gary Harris again, or TJ Warren. Those would be the 5 candidates. I'd be fine with the Raptors for what it's worth signing any one of them. I'd like to see the Raptors lean towards shooting, even though, as Khalil Deadpool pointed out previously, they don't give a shit about shooting. They would be a fun TJ Warren team as a flyer. I think that Gary Harris probably isn't long enough to play with them. I thought they were a sneaky good Victor Oladipo team because they need another half-court creator. And if he's willing to come off the bench, why not? I thought about Malik Monk a little bit too. I don't know if I'd spend the full non-taxpayer level on him, but he's young. He's 24 and he really cooked for the Lakers last year after the All-Star break. And he's someone who's going to give you some just north-south juice. And you don't have to worry about covering up for him defensively because you can just do it. I don't think after the draft that the Raptors are going to spend the full MLE on a big. And I always thought that was overblown to begin with. Like, I just didn't think that they needed, when they were linked to Rudy Gobert, I thought that was, I clearly thought that was from Utah's side, just because I don't see even Masai Ujiri thinking along those terms, knowing who it would have cost to give them up. So but if they were going to sign a big, Isaiah Hartenstein is a big that I would be willing to spend the full mid-level exception on. I wouldn't go that high for Mo Bamba. I'd go that high for Nick Claxton if they wanted to take a look at them. But again, if you think Christian Koloko is the answer, that's fine. Taking it number 33. The Raptors have had success with second-round picks before. I think he's 7'1", and he's only 22. So but I wouldn't spend it on a big. I think shooting or more half-court creation to take the burden off Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, make it easier to streamline Scotty Barnes' role, even though you hope that he becomes that player at a point. I would look towards that direction. And I'm not saying that Malik Monk is my favorite option for them. I'm not saying Gary Harris is. TJ Warren just feels like he'd be perfect to me there. Like, just the way that team plays, the responsibilities that they'd be able to give to him and sort of ease him into the fold. The Raptors might be my favorite TJ Warren destination. That, or perhaps Miami, because PJ Tucker appears to be on the way out. I would have loved to have seen PJ Tucker back in Toronto, maybe too. But yeah, I'm just going to say TJ Warren is my favorite for them. Or is an Otto Porter not really a wing, gives you some shooting? I think it's still TJ. If you think TJ Warren's healthy, I still feel like that's someone who could play more minutes than Otto Porter Jr. at this point. Bubba asks in the chat, who's your champ faves for next season? This is such a loaded question before we go through free agency. Damn. I'm going to say, am I going to say Golden State? Am I going to say Milwaukee? I'm not going to say Brooklyn. Spoiler alert for anybody that cares. And it's definitely not the Knicks. So look, I'm ruling teams out. I think it's the Clippers or the Warriors. The Clippers are, John Wall doesn't move the needle for me. And if it makes it more likely that they extended Zubats and got rid of Hartenstein, I might like them a little less, but you have Kawhi and Paul George if they're healthy, and Norman Powell's healthy. They just have a lot of different things they could do. I can't choose between the Warriors or the Clippers right now. I might skew toward the Clippers, just feels like they might be a little bit fresher, but now you're kind of having a fresher Clay next year for Golden State, and then Kuminga, Moody's a year older. What does Wiseman look like when he's healthy? So those two teams in the West. My nomination in the East as of now would probably be Boston or Milwaukee. I might be higher on the Sixers if James Harden's just in shape too. But I think I'm leaning towards the LA Clippers or the Milwaukee Bucks right now, or excuse me, the Golden State Warriors for that. I'm apparently out on the Phoenix Suns, who were my title pick this past year. That was, holy shit, what an end to the season for them. Bad Luck Crypto asks, what the fuck are the Kings going to do? Any talent going there? I've come around a little bit more on the Keegan Murray pick. I will be much less high on it if they decide to turn around and trade Harrison Barnes in like a John Collins package. I don't fucking understand that interest at all. They do have the non-taxpayer mid-level. I don't want to see them use it to sign a big. Can they go out and get a wing? TJ Warren or a Victor Oladipo? And I think he was mentioned as a target for the Kings. I don't know if he'd go to Sacramento, but if he's looking for opportunity, maybe you think Sabonis and Fox cannibalize touches a little too much. I actually think he'd be a great fit in Sacramento. Reunite with Sabonis. I would be intrigued to see that. They're a team that could use Gary Harris. Can they strike a trade for Kelly Oubre Jr.? Not a free agent, but you catch my drift there. Amir Coffey, I love the idea of Cody Martin there. I wrote about him as a potential fit for them, even just sort of like a stopgap placeholder. If it's a Daniel House, who you can get to like actually play the 3 and the 4, where you don't have that player right now necessarily. Maybe it's Keegan Murray, but it feels like he skews more towards the Harrison Barnes role. I already mentioned TJ Warren. Perhaps I wouldn't mind Otto Porter there, but again, some overlap. Is Harrison Barnes all of a sudden defending wings? Kyle Anderson could be interesting, but they need shooting around Fox and Sabonis as well. And so that's where it gets a little bit dicey for them. I don't think this would be a game changer, but in Austin Rivers, if you take a flyer on him, feels like that could go a long way. I think here's my Kings prediction. Aside from the fact that they better trade Richaun Holmes after having Sabonis there and now being interested in like these other bigs, I think they get a really good player with their non-taxpayer level. I think we look back at who they signed with a non-taxpayer level exception. We're like, fuck yeah. Like that guy's going to play more, way more than Maurice Harkless, even if he's still on the roster. That was a good decision by the Kings. I'm not as low on the Kings, I think, is like the consensus, even though I think they're a shit show of a franchise. But that's going to be my prediction. Just going to step on a limb now. Names I mentioned, maybe it's one of them. But yes, the Kings are going to make a good mid-level signing. Fiasco asks, are Miami in any real position to sign anyone that will put them in the same or better position in 2023? They are not. They're not going to have cap space in 2023. When you look at their books, you have Jimmy Butler at 43.7, Bam Adebayo at 32.6, Kyle Lowry at 29.7. There is your salary cap right there. Duncan Robinson at 18.1. Anything they do is going to have to happen via trade. So that would be 2023-24. That's the first season Tyler Hero's new deal would theoretically kick in. If you sign him to an extension, so that money is just movable over the offseason, you could really do some things because then his salary becomes interesting matching tool. Sign and trades are a little bit tougher because of base year compensation. Tyler Hero would essentially count for half the money going out as a trade piece for the Heat that he was signed to. As I mentioned earlier in this ramble, the Heat can trade technically Jovic plus 3 first round picks out. Yeah, they can, because they can make it a conditional one because the 25 first to OKC is lotto protected. If they really wanted to, they could deprotect that pick if OKC is willing to do it and trade their 2023 pick, 2027 pick, and 2029 pick. Attach that to Tyler Hero, Nikola Jovic, and Duncan Robinson. What is the Godfather offer there? That offer would theoretically still be available. They can go further out too as well next summer. Maybe it's even easier next summer when there's a 1 year fewer on Kyle Lowry's deal, 1 year fewer on Duncan Robinson's deal. Maybe you sign Tyler Hero to an extension. He's worth bigger money. And then at that point, Bradley Beal, Zach LaVine, they've gone through a year in their current situations. Are they looking to get out? Is there another star that we've yet to talk about? Is the Kevin Durant Brooklyn situation imploding? I think that he could have made one of the more competitive pick and prospect packages, mainly picks, for him if he hit the trade market. So I think anything the Heat do there is going to be decidedly via trade. They're just not going to have the money to go out and get a free agency. Jolt the Goat says, this isn't necessarily related to this free agency or any one player, but why don't more teams employ decreasing salary contracts? The idea that Jaren Jackson's contract, for example, decreases value as the cap rises following the new CBA and Morant Barnes extension kick in is a little salivating when I look around at these teams that are so deep in the tax or unable to make moves around the margins, especially since it seems like more and more teams are being handcuffed by the out years of these cumbersome contracts signed to these star players who either have lost, unsettled, and unnerved. So I think players don't want to accept this, or agents don't, whoever it is. When you're looking at one, you have to make it so that you can, this isn't going to work as well with max players because you're asking them to decrease their salary and you can't go above their initial max salary. And so in cases that where players are maxed out, it's not really, if you're giving them full boat, that's not an issue. The other thing is players and agents are probably thinking about extensions, and the way extensions work, unless they are super max eligible or so close to their max that it doesn't matter, you can give them 120% of their previous salary. And so if you're not close enough to your max salary, that proximity to it's going to absolutely matter. So if you have a lower contract and 100, that's de-escalating, and that 120% raise on an extension isn't going to get you to your max or as much money as it would if your number was higher. I think that's the biggest issue. I also think teams do plan in the short term to where they're going to prioritize as much flexibility now. And there are teams that look out and say, okay, we want this later. And Memphis with Jaren Jackson Jr. as an example, we're going to have to pay Ja. We're going to have to pay Desmond Bane. We want to have flexibility for some of our free agents coming up. that's great forward thinking by a franchise. I don't think all franchises think in those terms. I also think the other thing here is some franchises just aren't as creative when it comes to the salary cap as the others. There's a great conversation happening in our Discord about this. So please join our Discord, the links to which are in the YouTube and podcast description. Let's get into, I feel bad sort of blowing through this team, but what we said about them was dated. The Detroit Pistons, they went from having like $35+ million in cap space to they eradicate most of it by taking on Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel after having already taken on Kemba Walker. And they were going to get to the 35 million number after having Kemba Walker's money there. But you get to Nerlens Noel, who was making 9.2 million this year, plus Burks, that's 19 something million. They still by the way, Troy Weaver says that they're excited to have both of them there. And I think both those players help and make things easier on some of the younger players, like not having to put as much pressure on Jalen Duren up front with Noel there. Burks is sort of another shot creator and floor spacer to help out with Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham. I think if you want to keep those guys, that's fine. But you do have cap space to go out there now if you're Detroit and continue to lean into shooting, maybe take some flyers on some wings. You're not going to be inflating offer sheets now at this point anymore. That's perfectly fine. I think what they did really, they had one hell of an offseason here. They picked up getting Jalen Duren, just sort of a center of the future prospect, in addition to having Ivy, not having to trade up to get Ivy, by the way. That is just absolutely huge. So that's going to be big time for them. I think having those two players in place, I'm stumbling because I'm trying to read something right now. But anyway, so Detroit is still above $20 million in cap space, I believe, if they renounce the rights to Marvin Bagley, who's a restricted free agent, but they can still renounce him. I don't know who that gets you. Like, is $23 million getting Miles Bridges out of Charlotte? Is it getting Anthony Simons out of Portland? I do not think it would. But they can still do what they just did with the Knicks, where this time it was only 2 seconds, one of which was their own next year, I believe. So that's more power to them. This was smart GMing by them. They didn't need a ton of credit for what they did with Cade Cunningham last year. They got the number 1 pick. Congratulations. He was the no-brainer selection, in my opinion, to begin with. But they've shown some real chops this offseason alone. The Jeremy Grant trade was kind of panned, but that created the additional flexibility that allowed them to do all these things where you end up with, Jalen Duren being part of an extension basically of that Jeremy Grant trade because of the extra flexibility they had to take on Kemba. They already would have had that flexibility. I get it, but they've just done a lot of interesting maneuvering here. And the fact that they still have cap space after all they've done, they've loaded up on seconds, punting on that Milwaukee first. I don't have a problem with, because you were getting a lottery pick now and filling a need in the process with what was the consensus best center on the board in Duren. I do know that some people thought Mark Williams was a little bit better. So near consensus. It's top 4 potential for Milwaukee. If Giannis is there, they're going to be incredible. So I default to that. You didn't give up a ton of value. And look, the Nerlens Noel, Burks, yeah, you're absorbing that money. Those are players you could use. Burks is coming off foot surgery. That's fine. He is a very useful player. He was overworked by the Knicks and still came up with some big fourth quarter moments for them in 2020, 2021. I thought fans were too hard on him last year, just with the scope of his role and then the makeup of the rest of that roster. I like his fit in Detroit. And those are players you could turn around and probably move for more second round picks, depending on what other teams could potentially want from them. Like Nerlens Noel was one of the most underrated players in the NBA for 2020, 2021. Didn't have as good of a season last year. I think that has a lot to do with the way the Knicks run their front court. And Detroit's built to be a little bit different now. When you have Ivy and Cunningham and Sadiq Bey and even Burks in the fold, you can play 4 out around your bigs at this point. That helps Noel. That should help Duren. Excited to see this team. Even if Kelly Olynyk, if you want to go a little bit bigger in the front court, or he's going to stretch the floor, they can also view him as a walking trade exception. Like, as of right now, Kelly Olynyk for Gordon Hayward would work. And what would the Hornets give you to do that? And there could be similar thinking around if other teams are looking to get off of, what would Philly give up if it meant getting off Tobias Harris in such a deal? He has 2 more years after this one, so it's a little bit. No, he only has 1 year after this. So $37.6 million this coming season, 39.3 after. What would fit? Do they have enough draft equity to make that worth their while? I'm just so super incredibly high on the Pistons' future. I say it all of a sudden. I think Cade really put them on the map there. I think the improvement we've seen with, not improvement, but the willingness for Saddiq Bey to delve into his ball skills. He's going to give you some positional malleability. If we're looking at other free agents for them to target, they are sort of light in just the true wing department. You got rid of a bigger wing in Jeremy Grant. You still have Saddiq Bey. And Cade Cunningham, if you want to call him a wing, he is the body of a wing. If you're going to keep, I know they declined the team option on Frank Jackson. I haven't seen anything on Hamidou Diallo yet. I'll double check that as we're recording this because that deadline was actually tonight. So they picked up his team option. So you have Hamidou Diallo, but he's not 6'5". Like he's not this bigger wing. So you could go that route, or you should go that route. And so what you're set up to do now, we mentioned this the first time around, is can you inflate the value of contracts for veterans that maybe want to go somewhere else, but they're going to come for you to 1 or 2 years because you can give them a windfall that's going to exceed what they get for 3 or 4 from another team. Gary Harris still on the smaller end. He would absolutely work here. I liked Victor Oladipo for them at first. I don't really anymore following the acquisition of Alec Burks. You could go, a trade for Kelly Oubre Jr. doesn't do a lot for their shooting, but Amir Coffey, I would love him here. Can they be a TJ Warren team now? He would be borderline perfect for this squad. Otto Porter Jr., maybe not enough of a true wing. That's another name they could look at. I think I'd probably prefer Caleb Martin over Cody Martin for this team. Would make a lot of sense. What does it take? Like, would a Joe Ingles, who won't play in the middle of next season at the earliest, or a 35-year-old Wesley Matthews, did they just consider joining the fray with a young team if you can guarantee them some playing time? The wing market, again, to reiterate, is just so slim, but the Pistons are built to do basically whatever they want in here. And if they want to skew all defense, and not care about shooting because they're just going to bank on the skill of Cade and Jaden Ivey, that's fine too. Maybe you take a look, if Derek Jones Jr. is available for the minimum, you could go that route. But I think right now they need to be thinking wings. PJ Dozier could be a good one. I don't think that they don't need to be they could be a second draft destination, but a Kevin Knox, Jared Culver type job, and still sticking with Josh Jackson, that's not going to do it for me if I'm them. I have wondered if now, do you have just the requisite defensive juice or physical tools around where you can skew so far all offense that you're looking at a Jordan Nwora, who's probably better defensively than I'm giving him credit for, or even a Matt Thomas, just someone who's going to come in and straight chuck. Yuta Watanabe, if he's healthy, I would love him in Detroit. That's a bigger wing. That's a great name for them to look at. Again, not someone who should cost them a ton of cap space either. They can go so many more directions that they don't need a big. They talk about signing a veteran big. You have Nerlens Noel, Isaiah Stewart, Kelly Olynyk, and Jalen Duren. You don't need to go after a big now. And that frees you up to do everything. I would have liked Taurean Prince here to begin with, but he is off the board. Kyle Anderson, defensively, yes. Offensively, I'm just not sure. Could they be a team that gets in the Kenrich Williams sweepstakes? They're not going to, I don't really love a reunion with Bruce Brown there. Lonnie Walker could be fairly interesting, but I think he was more interesting if they didn't have an Alec Burks here. They could still, if you don't trust Killian Hayes or want more of a veteran presence, could they be a team that gets Tyus Jones? He could be pesky defensively, and he's going to give you some offensive pizzazz. Those are all names. I know we're regurgitating a lot of names here, but such is the state of the free agency market. And I wouldn't rule out the Pistons from Jolt Music in the chat says calling Jared Culver a negative offensive player is a compliment coming from a Grizzlies fan. I just want to point out, I was so high on Jared Culver when he was coming out of college. I didn't think there was going to be an issue with him sort of creating separation or getting his jumper down. I have very much missed on Jared Culver. That was a bad one for me. So yeah, but the Pistons, I think, look, they've probably eliminated themselves, and the Athletic reported per James Edwards III that they were never sort of in the let's go inflate the market for Ayton's definitely off the board now. You could still think about Miles Bridges. You might be giving Charlotte a discount if you're offering him something like $23 million a year. You can get to more money though. If you're willing to, can you find a home for Burks or Noel, even Kelly Olynyk? So you could still do that if you wanted a Simons here, who I wouldn't hate. Post Jaden Ivey, I wouldn't be in love with as much. I liked him with K to begin with. Or if you wanted Miles Bridges, again, those are not names that I love for them. So they're not done, and they can take on more bad money. It depends on what the market for that is. But They made out well in the Kemba Walker trade, and he was sort of if it's actual dead money, a player that you're not going to keep who can't really play for you. He was an expiring contract, and they got quite a bit for him. Something I would like to see them do: can they go out and buy, like act as a buyer on the trade market now for a wing, with not like you're not trading a future first and you're not giving up a core piece, like a Josh Richardson for them? Is that someone who's just, is he at all gettable uh, in their books, and just to sort of just give you that other like truer, pure, wing in the rotation? I do not know. Kenrich Williams, I mentioned him before. If Phoenix is looking to cut costs, should they have to re-sign Ayton, or they're worrying about campaign's extension? Could you be a Jay Crowder destination? That's someone that I would potentially like here as well. I wouldn't mind a Terrence Ross flyer again after the Alec Burks signing. They are different players. But I think Alec Burks might be better than Terrence Ross defensively at this point. So food for thought there. But is there that scenario for them? They would be like, they wouldn't be a good Royce O'Neal team. You'd have to give up too much to get him. But like, if you had a KCP reunion or a Kyle Kuzma, like I would love one of them for this team. Those are players that you have to give up actual value to get. I mentioned Kelly Oubre Jr. before. Defensively, like, yeah, for sure. He's not the best defender, but can be moved around the wing spots. What does it cost to get him? If Charlotte's looking, like, is it just a pick, like a lower second round pick, or not a lower, but a second round pick, because Charlotte's going to cut payroll after signing Miles Bridges? That would be interesting. I also look Kelly Olynyk for Gordon Hayward. Like, if Charlotte's attaching something to that, I would totally consider it. But the Kelly Oubre Jr. model is an example. So that's someone that maybe they could look at via trade. Houston needs to cut bodies, but they're sort of lower on wings too. Like, you don't like a flyer on David Nwaba or Sterling Brown. I don't know that that's going to do much for this team. It would be funny if they were just someone, if Houston wanted to offload Eric Gordon and they decided to go that route. Indiana is treating Malcolm Brogdon like an asset. Otherwise, you could maybe make the case for them. I don't know if, like, the Clippers aren't going to be offloading Marcus Morris Sr., and I don't even know if the Pistons would want Marcus Morris Sr. Let's face that. He would be good, but like that, and that's also just not sort of a true wing as well. And it's sort of it's like it's been there, sort of done that type deal. Unless I'm forgetting that he didn't play. No, he did play. He was there for 2 seasons. Good. I'm not misremembering. That's why I was stammering. So, but the Pistons are set up to do so much. I'm a lot higher on their future, and I was already fairly high just based off of having Cade Cunningham there and showing just the mechanisms through which they've traveled this offseason, and still being so flexible after all this. Like, that's the thing, is they're still so flexible, and there's just a bunch of different things that they could do if they really want. Again, if you don't trust Killian Hayes and like New Orleans is looking to get off Devontae Graham, like, do you take a flyer on him if he's attached to a little bit of an asset? Like, there's just so many different routes they could go. I'm sorry to be so fascinated by the Pistons now, but just a home run offseason so far for them. If we look back and we grade these teams and look at winners and losers, they're going to be one of the biggest winners and probably get just one of the highest grades. And look, to round out the podcast, the Knicks are expected to offer Jalen Brunson a 4-year deal in the range of $110 million. So that is not his max, but over 4 years, you're looking at between 27 and 28 a year. The Mavs were reportedly willing to go about 5 years and 110. So where I was at was correct for a change. I'm normally wrong. The Knicks are giving Brunson over 4, what the Mavericks were willing to go essentially over 5. That is a big difference for Jalen Brunson. Gets a more prominent role. Don't love the fit. Thank you for everyone who, Jolt Music. Kuzma would be awesome for the Pistons. Yeah. So what do you give up if you're the Pistons? Maybe Washington's scared of his free agency. I think it's more likely if there was a 3-team deal where they're trying to get somebody else and the inbound team there doesn't want him or something. It's just, I'm not giving up actual, like, a ton of value for these guys, which is why I thought Josh Richardson might be more attractive, because I don't know how much the Spurs are going to value him. And it's also why Jay Crowder, it seems like Phoenix is all of a sudden, he's topsy-turvy, but it seems like Phoenix is all of a sudden like not as high on him, just reading between the lines there. I did think, not a wing. Would you hate Doug McDermott with the Pistons? I don't know that I would hate him. Like, there's some overlap. There's not overlap with Kelly. Like, you want a shooter, like a movement shooter and some guy who could finish off cuts. He'd be interesting. I don't know. Are the Spurs looking to get off his money? I have no idea what the Spurs are doing. I am so just freaking enthralled about the San Antonio Spurs because I want them to keep Murray and go hard after like an Anthony Simons in free agency. They apparently would prefer me to cry though. So thank you anyone who stuck with me. Pistons fans, I hope that you enjoyed what was an abbreviated look ahead here. We did go really deep, but I tried to recycle some of the free agency targets we talked about. I didn't release that pod yet. They blew it up. We were talking about what they might do with their 35 plus million in cap space. And now they still have the ability to get to 23. Just a hell of an offseason from you guys, your guys, whatever you refer to the front office as. Until next time, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast on YouTube. Join our Discord, wherever you get your podcasts as well. Follow us on all the socials, the links to which are in the description. Again, thank you so much. And we leave you with a shout out, as always, to the one, the only. He's number one in our hearts. Frank fucking Ntilikina.